All right, well, welcome everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Kate Spurrier. I am on the board for MMBBA and also co-chair of our education committee. Um, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I think there's so many of us that really haven't been taking good care of ourselves during this very, very busy time. And we're so blessed to have all of this business. But for those of us that have been in it for a while, we're used to having the busy times and the slow times. And I think for a lot of us, it's come at great personal cost, having, all this business and stress and things like that. So we have put together three really amazing speakers that have very different focuses from each other. We're very, very excited about it. We're hoping that this is going to kind of piggyback off of any New Year's resolutions that you had for yourself. Certainly, if you're not at your best, you're not going to be at the best for your clients or for your family or for your friends. So without further ado, I want to first thank very much Frank Dana from Appraisal Logistics. He's our sponsor today. We could absolutely not have done this without him. So thank you very much, Frank and Appraisal Logistics, for sponsoring. And then we just have a couple of housekeeping things as well. So we think you're going to get the most out of this presentation by putting yourself in speaker view. So if we all look like the Brady Bunch right now, that's not the view that you're going to want. You're going to want to go up to the right-hand corner where it says view on Zoom and just switch over to the speaker view. And then the other thing that we're going to ask is that we're going to do all the questions at the end. Some of the speakers have to jump on and off to be able to deal with patients. So if you don't want to forget your question, feel free to put it in the chat. And then, as Amanda had already mentioned, this meeting will be recorded. So to kick us off, we have Dr. Rowe, and we're looking very forward to seeing what she's got to say.
Hi, thank you, Kate. Thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to, especially during this time, to bring this information to you because I know how hard you're all working, and this is an extremely stressful time for many, many reasons. So I'm going to quickly jump ahead to talk about, all the tips you can do on a daily basis to try to keep yourself in balance. I've been in medicine for 24 years now, and I am practicing an integrative model, and I see in 80% of my internal medicine practice, I feel like is related to stress-related conditions. And this is a perfect example of a time where really the value of taking care of yourself and prioritizing your health is ultimately important, not only for just maintaining health and preventing illness, but also to protect your immunity. So a lot of the slides that I talk about is very cohesive with your immune status and how, during this time of COVID and the fear that we have, one thing we can all do for ourselves is really focus on keeping our immune system healthy. And a lot of the things I'll talk about today are really in line with that. So I'm going to see if I can have control of this slide. Sorry. Sorry, I just need to go back. It's not letting me go back. All right, so, these are definitely unprecedented times. We've never seen anything so stressful, along with your workload being high, the fear of the coronavirus now, and all the excessive worry and the fear of being out of control with not knowing kind of different information coming at us. It was changing on a daily basis in the beginning. Now we've kind of settled down. Now there's a lot of thought about vaccines and getting kids back into school and who's going to do what with each vaccine. So there's always this worry because this has never happened before. So part of the issue for us is to try to bring back control in our lives of what we can control. And especially for, women in general, and I'm not discounting the men in the group, but I feel like sometimes women hold a larger burden of the nurturing and the caregiving in the house. And so there's an added stress when you work from home to switch off. And I apologize if I'm sounding too gender specific, but anybody who's kind of working from home can't really shut it off anymore. It's like we're constantly in that work-life balance that just merges together, which is not a good place to be. We need to learn how to compartmentalize and kind of divide and conquer. We're also a sandwich generation where we're now taking care of elderly parents or neighbors or people who can't leave their house because of their immune status. So it's not just our household we're worried about the community and maybe some parents that live outside of our home. And we need to make wholesome meals. A lot of us, including myself, have never cooked so much in my life. You know, we're trying to make meals because one, restaurants were closed, is the increased fear of going out, the takeout fears in the beginning, but we're learning how to make wholesome meals, which is great, but also another stress in terms of getting the groceries done and the shopping, as well as the cooking and the cleaning. And we worry about childcare, right? Because of the students and the schools and how we're homeschooling. Again, I'm part of that, where I have 2 kids out of college and living in LA who come home and they're adult children, totally different kind of stress level. And then I have a middle school kid at my house that we have to monitor. So different levels of stress about the education issues as well. So in spite of all that, all of this stress that you feel, it is not, you know, what is wrong with me. This is like a huge burden on us as a society, and it's leading to burnout. There's burnout in every area, in healthcare, in every single subset of medicine and healthcare, but also all the different disciplines, including your industry as well. And what goes oftentimes is ourself. We don't want to take care of ourselves because we got too much to do in the day. That leads to burnout, actually leads to excessive fear, excessive worry, inability to sleep. When we're tired, we don't want to move. And Josh is going to do a phenomenal job, I think, trying to get us to, implement us to be able to move again. And it increases irritability, sugar cravings. I know Kim's going to talk about what we can do for nutrition and our food, but it increases our sugar cravings, and it increases our take of alcohol and caffeine. And there's been studies to show that caffeine and alcohol intake especially, has gone up about 40% in the last year. And it's mostly actually more in women than men. And it's not to say that no alcohol is the answer, but we need to curb it, because the sugar and the alcohol is also affecting our gut microbiome. So what does this all mean? Well, it leads to inflammation in our body, and inflammation is an itis of everything. An itis of your brain could look like anxiety, depression, fatigue. An itis on the skin could look like rashes, headaches, joint pains. My gut doesn't feel good. Basically, it leads to a stressed out body and the stressed out mind. And these symptoms can be all encompassing. It can be fatigue, poor digestion. It can be I'm breaking out. I can't lose my weight. I can't concentrate. I'm less efficient. My stamina is less. My memory's worse. My mood's worse. My achiness, irregular menstrual cycles. You go to your physician, you say, I just don't feel well. And all the blood work comes back normal. And so there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah, you're not dying, but you are in this state of burnout, which is really important to figure out and do something about. So next slide. So this is the balance that we're going to talk a lot about today, the balance between our stressors and our resources. So this balanced body is a balanced mind, and the stress that we feel and a balanced body mind allows us to operate much more efficiently. It allows us to have a much better day, increases our happiness factor. In fact, it increases our longevity. But now, in addition to usual stressors of like poor sleep, just the worry, the anxiety, the stress of the day-to-day, water, the environmental toxins, the bad foods that we might be eating because we're stressed out, the sedentary lifestyle, and all the environmental toxins, we also have now isolation, fear of illness, tense political environment. We have economic instability. Do I have my job? Can I hire more people back? These are when you're having a small business, these are the issues, and you can't go anywhere. You can't get a break. You're scared to travel. There's no rest. So those are our stressors, but we have a lot of tools that we're going to talk about. But before I do that, I want to talk about how we break down, because it's important to know what makes us break down in order to learn how to build ourselves up. There's a nervous system that we have that's called the autonomic nervous system. And that's the nervous system that we don't have full control of. If I say, I want to pick up the pen, that's my voluntary nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system is in charge of our stress response. And it, quite frankly, keeps us alive. It's in charge. It's a sympathetic, parasympathetic system. And the sympathetic system is your fight or flight and your ability to handle stress. And it gets us running from that tiger, getting out of the fire, getting out of the zone of where we're going to actually get hurt. The parasympathetic is your rest and digest. And these two systems are supposed to be up and down. They're supposed to, one goes up and then comes down. The other one goes up and comes down. They can't be up at the same time. So when we signal our bodies that we're running from a tiger, we have a deadline, we have a workload, we got to take care of our family, we got the kids, we got to take care of our parents and cook and clean and all of those other things. The parasympathetic, the rest and digest, shuts down. So we really need to acknowledge that this is happening, and we want to bring up that parasympathetic system. So everything I'm going to talk about today is about reinforcing that parasympathetic, because it's the sympathetic system, the flight or flight response is kind of up to your environment and your life level. So what we can do about it is work on that rest and digest. When we go into sympathetic overdrive, when that sympathetic system is always up, we have a hormone from our adrenal gland that keeps us going. And that hormone is called cortisol. Cortisol has a bad rap. Cortisol, people hear the word cortisol and they say, oh, it's bad for me. It makes me fat. It gives me diabetes and all of these other things. But actually, cortisol is not bad or good. It actually is there to help you get through that stressful period. It mobilizes our adrenaline so that we move. Because if we're running from a tiger, we want to not be sedentary and lethargic and have to go to the bathroom and have to worry about, reproduction, all these things, because we won't live if that happens. So cortisol activates our adrenaline, which then also allows our sugar to get mobilized, deposits fat in our midsection so that we have tools and storage in case we are going into a starvation mode. It allows us to get oxygen to our legs so we can move, dilates our pupils, and shuts down things like gut and urination and things like that that's going to slow us down. So blood pressure goes up. And as you know, a lot of these things, remember I said, a lot of what I see in primary care and in internal medicine is the consequences of elevated sympathetic drive, which means if you always had high cortisol, if you never shut that down, and it's a hormone that affects your metabolism, it can affect fat deposition, it can affect sugar. If you kept it going, you could see how you can gain weight in the midsection, which can look like metabolic syndrome. It can look like, fat that's inflammatory that then causes your lipids to go up. It can increase your sugar that can cause diabetes down the road. Blood pressure can go up and that turns into hypertension. Elevated heart rate can be persistent and that turns into arrhythmias. So all of these responses can lead to symptoms, which if unchecked can lead to illnesses and diagnoses that we don't want. So how do we protect ourselves? We have the ability to work on our parasympathetic. So today we're going to talk about, Josh will talk about exercise. I will talk a little bit about mind, body, yoga, movement, clean water, and plant-based diet is kind of my go-to, but nutritious foods, whole foods are really, I think what Kim's going to be talking about as well, and clean water, meditation, restorative sleep. But the other tools that are really valuable to us is fasting regimens, optimism, our mindset on how we think about all this, and working on tools that improve our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve is the nerve that inputs to our GI tract. And that's our digest part. And it is the largest input to the parasympathetic system. So anything that influences our vagus nerve will really be helpful for us to keep going with balancing us and keeping us out of trouble. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the digest component of rest and digest. The role of gut in stress is very, very, very important. So I'm an internist, but basically all day long I do GI stuff. I deal with all sorts of GI ailments because the gut is the first thing to sometimes start. Bloating, gas, heartburn, indigestion, constipation, diarrhea. They call it IBS, they call it heartburn, but it's your gut microbiome is changing. So why is the gut so important? It holds our immune system. It holds the cells in our body that not only protect us from the bad guys, but also start that process of possibly having an autoimmune reactions to our cells if that gut barrier is destroyed. So 80% of the cells that make all the itises in our body, and remember, everything in medicine has an itis to it. A headache is an itis, a rash is an itis of the skin. You can have an itis of the brain that can look like memory loss. You can have an itis of the gut that looks like IBS or IBD. So there's a lot of itises in the family, in our body, but that generates from the immune system going awry. And 80% of that are the signals that are coming into the gut. The gut bugs, which it develops into, there's 100 trillion of them, and they have genes that give us 3 million genes. And those genes do everything for us. They help us digest, they process our foods, they give us hormones, they give us our neurotransmitters that help us think and help keep our brain functioning. They are in charge of our metabolism. They are in charge of our aging hormones. So they do so much for us. We have to keep our gut bugs happy. There's also this gut-brain connection. So when you're feeling like you're less efficient, you're foggy, all of that is the gut is the second brain. So we really want to take care of the gut because will help determine how we age in terms of our brain function and our efficiency. It also houses our serotonin, our juice that keeps our mood happy. It also makes our dopamine and our norepinephrine, which are the neurotransmitters that keep our mood good and healthy. And so that makes us want to create new patterns for ourselves. So we all wake, January 1, we're all creating these systems for ourselves to say, this year I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, the top 3 things. But you need dopamine to kind of maintain that initiative. And so if you don't have a good gut, sometimes our will to make changes is not there, which is why I always start with the gut. And that's why it's so important. At the end of the day, the microbiome, and I'm not going to harp on this because I know Kim's going to talk a lot about the food. Microbiome is determined a lot by what we eat. So bright colors, whole foods, different variety is the key. You don't want to be eating the same every day. You want to try to change what you're doing, even if it's a small little change. Like today I'm going to have raw kale and tomorrow I'm going to have roasted kale. Even if you can't go to the store, but you can cook things in different ways, that will start to create diverse microbiome. Each food grows this particular bug, and our concept of wellness and health is showing that the more good bugs we have, the better our health is long term and the more our longevity is. So you can actually have some anti-aging effects when you create a diverse microbiome with whole foods. And I always say things like eat the rainbow, decrease processed foods. But to boot, in the last 2 weeks, there's been a lot of data that's coming out that says that our immune system, the way we handle COVID, is determined by how our gut bugs are. So when they looked at studies, they saw correlation of people who did worse with coronavirus actually had worse bad gut bugs and less diversity. So that was out in this article, which I'm happy to share with you guys. You can put that as a link. And there was also an article that recently got published in November in one of the major cardiology journals that talked about if you lower foods that are processed like sugars, grains, fast fried foods, sodas, processed foods, organ and red meats, you decrease and you add foods that are anti-inflammatory, like green leafy vegetables, yellow vegetables, whole grains, coffee, tea, and happy to say wine made the list. So if you increase these foods, you can avoid and reduce your risk of the number 1 killer is still heart disease. Despite what COVID has done, it's still the number 1 killer in the country. It lowers your risk by 48% and stroke risk by 24% by just changing what you eat. So this is really exciting. And to boot, it'll start helping your immune system. So just as a little kind of a couple of words about what to do, these are all disruptors of the gut microbiome. So high sugar foods and beverages, processed foods with lots of preservatives. That's when you look at labels and you see a ton of words that look like your chemistry class. Those, start looking at labels, folks, because it's really important to know what we're putting inside of us. But those preservatives are really can induce lots of bad changes in our body. So going back to whole foods and non-chemical things are really important. Reducing high animal products and creating more of a alkaline environment is really important in helping our gut heal. But it's not just what you eat, it's when you eat. So, we're working all day, we're sitting in front of Zoom. I know when I work from home, I'm terrible at walking past the pantry and not going into the closet. And even if it's cashews, even if it's something super nutritious, I grab something. So then I wind up grazing most of the day. It turns out that if you eat less frequently, and if you eat and you have time restricted feedings where you give yourself windows where you're going to eat, whether that's 8-hour window, I'm eating from 11 to 6, 11 to 7, or I'm eating for 12 hours only, that really, really changes your immune system for the better. It helps with aging, it helps with memory, it helps with weight loss, it helps with sugar control. So it's not just what you eat, it's when you eat. So that's the other small things we can do is to limit our intake of calories and foods to 12 hours or less. And 12 hours, I would say, is the minimum. Now, I want you guys to all check with your physicians, make sure that you're not on meds that will interfere or have a medical issue. But most people can do 12 hours without a problem. And I ask people to try to work up to 16 hours. I do a lot of fasting in my practice, periodic fasting for 2 or 3 days. I'm going to do that as one of my New Year's resolution next week, to do 3-day water fast. And fasting mimicking diets like Prolon are excellent. They have a lot of data to show that they change the immune system. They're actually doing this protocol for 5 days. These are preset foods that are given out, and you only eat, it's a plant-based, gluten-free, dairy-free program, but there's lots of soups in there and teas, and you do this program for 5 days, and it has been shown to reduce waist circumference. It's been shown to reduce sugar, reduce your lipids, reduce your markers of inflammation. In fact, they're even doing it before chemotherapy now to see, because the cancer cells do better and your body heals better if you fast. So this is actually a great other little thing that you can do during the day. Now we'll focus on the rest part of rest and digest. We've talked about digest as what you can eat. Like I said, Kim's going to go into it in more detail. When you eat is also just as important. The rest part is one of my favorites. I think stress is a huge part, which causes a lot of inflammation in the body. We know that negative thoughts, negative worry, and self-talk that's demeaning for ourselves, like, oh, I'm so bad at this, I can't, why am I so bad at this, why can't I ever get this right? All of that increases inflammation in our brain, but it also increases inflammation in our body. So we want to really find a way to calm the mind down and also rest better. First way to rest better is work on your sleep. And this is a big problem. There's some really ridiculous numbers of 48%, 54%, up to 70% of Americans sometimes, are not rested well. We need 7 to 9 hours of restorative sleep. That's not, I'm sitting in the bed staring at my ceiling. It's literally, you wake up and you feel like your day's ready to start. You want to go through those 4 cycles of sleep, 4 stages of sleep and REM, and you want to do that 4 or 5 times in a row. And that's restorative sleep. So if you're waking up because of your pet or your child or pain or to go to the bathroom, or sounds like you have the TV running or something like that, that is not giving you restorative sleep. This is a really important issue we want to work at. It reduces heart risk. It helps metabolize fat. So one of the ways to help your metabolism is to sleep better, because if you don't sleep well, you're waking up with higher cortisol in the morning, which produces fat in the midsection. You're waking up with higher sugar and a higher blood pressure. It also helps hormone balance. When you sleep better, you make more growth hormone, you make more DHEA, you can do better with all the sex hormones because your cortisol does better. So your sex drive can go up, your muscle mass can change because of you're making more DHEA and anabolic hormones. You also detoxify during your sleep. So actually what happens when you sleep is your brain everything goes, shrinks a little bit, and the fluid around the brain starts to get out all those toxins. And that happens within, you have to sleep for 4 hours in order for that to happen. So you detoxify your brain, you detoxify your body during sleep. It heals you. Sleep is healing. It's not the Band-Aid that we want when we're feeling unwell. We want to heal from inside. We want to heal our immune system. We want to improve memory. So this is a big deal to try to focus on. So sleep loss can also affect your immune system. It helps lower protective cytokines. Almost every one of you have heard the cytokine storm issue that's happened with COVID. And part of it is that we have these collars of cells that help fight the bad guys called cytokines. And there's good ones and there's bad ones, and then they get out of control. When you have sleep loss, it lowers your protective cytokines. It reduces your antibodies, and it decreases detoxification, which can all lower your immune system, which makes you more susceptible to things like viruses and bacteria. It increases your cortisol, it reduces memory. So as hard as you're working every day, you're going to work harder because you just aren't as efficient, and your memory is not as good. It worsens mood disorders. So if you're already anxious or depressed, sleep loss is going to make that a lot worse. So also what just came out is if you want to have an optimal response for the vaccine, you want to get 7 hours of sleep the day before. That is probably the best thing you can do to make sure that vaccine takes well for you and, gives you the best outcome possible. So prioritize your sleep. Make it an important issue. Don't negotiate your sleep. Remove your notifications from your phone. Stop having caffeine in the afternoon. Stop doing things that are going to make you anxious, like maybe watching the news, reading, very negative things, even if it's a book or scary things. Stop electronics 1 to 2 hours before bed. I know that sounds horrifying, but it is really, really important to try to get into the mindset of it is not the last thing you do or the first thing to do in terms of looking at your phone before you go to bed and looking at your phone when you first wake up. Try to put the phone aside. an hour. Try to wait to get to the phone because it'll be there. You guys know that we are all accessible. We can get information. We want quiet time. We want to be able to shut down. Use glasses to block blue light. There's a True Blue Vision that I've recommended to block that light. Read books, but watch TV. You can watch TV if it's far away, but make sure you shut it off so the noise isn't going to wake you up. And avoid LED lights in the bedroom because it can be very stimulating. These are a couple of ways to prioritize sleep. And then sleep aids that I always use in my practice, you can use essential oils and lavender to help you calm your mind and start to sleep. You can use Epsom salt soaks, which are you can do them in a bucket. This is old-fashioned Epsom salt that you can get from the grocery store. Put 1 cup of it in a bucket, soak your feet in it for 15 minutes. That starts to calm your body down. It gives you magnesium, which is hugely healing for the body. It gives you trace minerals that calms your body down as well. You can take a bath in it if you want. It's just that you don't have to. I love Yoga Nidra. It's a type of yoga where you're on your back and it's a guided imagery that you do, and it's indicated specifically for sleep deprivation. So it's a nice way to do it. It's on lots of apps like Insight Timer is an app that you can have access to. It's a free app that you can download. There's guided meditation on there specifically for sleep loss. There's sounds, there's ocean sounds, there's white noise, there's all sorts of things. And they even have audio. So you can have a story read to you through the app if you need something like that to help your brain calm down and go to sleep. Chamomile, passion flower teas are also nice herbs to add to help you calm down and get some sleep. So please work on some of these things and see if you can sleep better. Sitting is the new smoking. So when we're sitting all day, it's really as bad for us as smoking is to our health. And that's why Josh is going to talk to you about things that are going to get us up and moving. But we want to not be able to sit. So in my practice, I have a exercise ball that I sit on, but it's really important when we're doing these Zoom calls all day that we do things in between them to help us not be so sedentary. Exercise, we know, does all the good things like help our heart, but it also increases our endorphins. So it helps our mood. It increases serotonin, adrenaline, and dopamine. It helps promote your sleep. And it increases this PGC1, which when your muscle mass goes up, you have higher levels of this PGC1, which increases our resilience to stress, and stress can cause depression. So when we have a higher muscle mass, we're exercising more, we're more resilient to becoming depressed. So that's another reason to start exercising. Like I said, some of the little things you can do is a sit, stand, desk, an exercise ball, take stairs more, walk during breaks, and stretch. Some of the stretches I like to do are sun salutations. This is a wonderful thing to learn about. I've put this with the teaser that we sent with the, I think the article that was sent out for this workshop. The sun salutations are a series of poses, and specifically the standing forward fold is an incredibly rejuvenating thing to do in between Zoom calls, just to lay down. It looks ridiculous, but it works really well. And I think it has to do with something that's related to draining our lymph. Our lymph is the fluid around our body that detoxifies us. And when we do these movements that work on our extensor muscles, which are the muscles that are the opposite of what we do when we sit all day, our extensor muscles, we move the lymph in our body and helps our body detoxify. So if you just did the standing forward fold or the down dog between your Zoom visits, you're going to start to feel so much better. So just in terms of that fatigue we get, that brain fatigue we get at the end of our day, or maybe even midday when we're just so tired of staring at our screen, these are nice things to do. And I will have this attached to your, to the, I guess, whatever Amanda sends after the talk, because I think this is a really important set of poses to do. Can't seem to get to the next one. All right, so let's get to the mind body, which is really the crux of what we want to talk about for me anyway, in terms of keeping our mind stable. Breathing is our tool that invokes the parasympathetic. This is something we can do in between every call, in our car, wherever we are. I love 4-7-8 breathing. It is not the only way to breathe. There's lots of different types of breathing, but it's just one way to kind of breathe in. You breathe in for 4, you hold it for 7, and you exhale for 8. So normally I would do this with all you guys, but I can't see all of you, but it's just a simple technique and every time you exhale longer than you inhale, you invoke your parasympathetic system. So you start putting a signal to the body to say, calm down. I'm okay. I'm not running from a tiger. So you do this set of breathing maybe 5 times in a row, a few times during the day. Do it in between your calls if you want, but it really does reset us. Meditation is always wonderful to do. Meditation is a practice that I would like people to think about as a daily practice, as opposed to, yeah, I meditated once a week. It shouldn't count. Meditation and yoga to me is not like a gym class, because if we need to meditate and do some yoga postures on a daily basis in order to keep our mind body connected. So you can meditate for 10 minutes a day. Ideally, it's about 20 minutes if you have the time, but I wouldn't not meditate just because you don't have the time. But I will tell you, when I first started this practice, I started waking up earlier, and it sounded crazy to me because I didn't think I had one more minute to spare. But if I meditated in the morning, I had a better day. It was a much more efficient day. I just got more done. I was happier. So you'll find that adding another 10 minutes to your day might be worth it, because you're just going to have a better day. There are slow movement techniques called Tai Chi or Qigong, which you might be able to do at your local gyms. So I don't know why I went to the next slide. Acupuncture and Reiki, we were doing both of these at the office. Right now, we're just doing acupuncture. Another form of mind-body calming down is lymph treatments. Lymph treatments we do at our office. It promotes detoxification and signals the vagus nerve to relax. These are the things you can do in between Zoom calls to help your mind body. There is a set of new exercises called polyvagal exercises. You can find these on YouTube. They're called basic polyvagal exercises. And they're basically, the concept is that you're invoking the vagus nerve in 30 seconds or a minute by doing these small exercises that involve your neck and your eyes. So just looking at your eyes, looking down at your shoulder for 30 seconds like this, or staring off to the side for 30 seconds to a minute like this, can start invoking your vagus nerve. So small techniques. The book is called Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve. If you want to get it on Amazon, the first 180 pages of it is all theory, which is fabulous. But the last 50 are actual exercises. So the day you get the book, you can start doing the exercises. You don't have to read it all to understand what's happening. There's also nice YouTube videos called Basic Polyvagal Exercises on YouTube, which I've sent the link to Amanda for. The other thing is energy medicine. And this is a new realm of medicine. And I've learned it through Donna Eden. And these are tapping techniques. And some of you may know EFT or tapping techniques that people use for anxiety. But if you literally go like this over your clavicle, like this, when you're feeling really tired or run down, you start to wake up. I'm an acupuncturist, so this is a very powerful acupuncture point called Kidney 27, and it starts to wake you up. So simple techniques like this, tapping your face. There's a regimen she goes over in her video, Donna Eden. The video is about, I don't know, 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but you can do this in a couple of minutes. You can do this in 3 minutes in the morning or in between calls. The regimen is also given to Amanda, so she can send the link to you guys. It's a wonderful way to wake up. There's some cross body moves that you can do to start moving the energy in our body. We're all vibrational energy. So when we start to move that vibrational energy, you will start to feel your brain wake up. It's like a shot of caffeine. So this is really an amazing way to try to help us heal. Forward fold, like I said before, and down dog are also things to do in between calls so that you can stay alert and be efficient. So mindfulness, if you want to get back to meditation, Headspace is an app on your phone. I think the first 10 days are free. Insight Timer is also a free app that's got hundreds, if not thousands, of options in there. Headspace, I think, has lots of classes. If you want to go deeper into meditation, Transcendental Meditation has courses in the area. It's a little bit expensive. It's $900. You can get a letter from your doctor to get it down to like $150. But it is a form of meditation, and it's not something you have to do. It's just out there, and it works for people. I've done everything on this, so I know all the differences. And at the end of the day, I will tell you, it doesn't matter how you meditate, just meditate. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is also a course that's available in the area, which is through a surgeon called Gina Sager. She comes to my practice before COVID. She does these courses online too. And you could look her up at ginasager.com, and she has these courses available. Art of Living is another course that I took in the area. I'm doing a refresher this weekend. It's about different breathing techniques where you breathe instead of just sitting there meditating, you're doing movement and you're also increasing oxygenation. So it's a really nice way to increase brain flow. But during COVID, breathing techniques and lung volumes are so important. This is also a nice course to do, and everything's virtual right now. If you look up their courses. Body scans is literally visualizing, closing your eyes and visualizing like you going through a scan or light coming through you, and you're visualizing your eyes, your neck, you're just going through your whole body. Hugely relaxing. It's out of proportion to what you think will happen, but you can listen to body scans on Insight Timer if you want, or you can just visualize it if you don't have any technology with you. So these are small techniques to do. My recommendation is to try to start a daily practice in the morning. You wake up, you don't look at your phone, you do one of these things and just start your day. I guarantee you within a week, you're going to see a difference. You're going to say, oh my gosh, my days are so much better. And you will stay more balanced, because when your mind is balanced, your body's balanced. The vagus tone, the vagus nerve is also one that we want to support. Everything I've talked about supports that vagal tone. But you can also do these small things like gargling. So gargling before you eat can support digestion because it supports your vagal tone and it tells your body, I'm not running from a tiger. It's time to rest and digest. So gargling can help. Humming can help. So if you can hum and sing loudly like people do in church, or singing in the shower, that increases your vagal tone. Cold water, when you're really wiped out, you splash cold water on your face, that actually supports your vagal tone. I have recommended through for the immune system support. Remember, everything that supports the vagal tone also supports your immune system. Hot, cold showers, that link is on my website. It's called cold showers. When you go from hot to cold in the shower, it stimulates the immune system, not only, but it also helps your vagal tone. So you can do cold water sprays. Or you can, at the end of your shower, you can also do a cold water kind of submerged for about 30 seconds. Which is also painful in the beginning, but your body habituates to it. Diaphragmatic breathing. So when you do take a breath, you want to inhale and watch your belly pop out. So that's, so you don't want to breathe in. We do shallow breathing when we're stressed, where we're not getting a lot of airflow and the bottom parts of our lungs are not being effectively utilized. So when you do diaphragmatic breathing, you take a deep breath in and you inhale so that your belly goes out. It's easier to do when you're laying flat on your back. But then when you exhale, you want to bring that belly button back towards your back. And these are some simple techniques you can do again in between your calls. The basic polyvagal exercises, the Donna Eden, energy medicine, and yoga and meditation are always great ways to support the vagal tone. Also, remember, your attitude matters. There is so much information in our book. We did a second edition to our book, and we included optimism in it because the data on optimism and our hopefulness and our attitude actually helps you live longer. So I used to think that you were born optimistic or pessimistic. That's just the way it was. But it turns out that it's only 40% that you have this issue. 60% of that, up to 60%, is mutable. You can change the way your attitude is through these techniques, through gratitude journaling, or just random acts of kindness and turning off the negative narratives in our brain. And there's all sorts of information out there through different sources, positive psychology courses. And I will send those links to you, Amanda, because I have a lot of things to send to you for optimism if you guys want to work on that. There's podcasts, there's courses on Coursera. And this is just such a great thing to do because we know now that longevity increases. People live longer when they're optimistic. They have less heart disease. They have less anxiety and depression. They have less strokes, and they have less cancer rates. So optimism is a really big deal. And so these are some of the things that you can do: visualizing, journaling events. There's one type of meditation I have found that summarizes a lot of this stuff, and it's called a 6-phase meditation. It's by a man named Vishen Lakhani, and he has his own app called Amvana, and I believe it's still free, but you can do a 6-phase meditation, which takes you through all of this in about 15 to 20 minutes. So you can change the way you think about your hopefulness for things based on just working at it, which is really exciting. So really at the end of all this, it's to take home messages is your gut bugs matter, take care of them. especially the nurture, the people who are in there that are listening, that are we just want to nourish them. We want to support our parasympathetic. We want to work on our vagal tone. We want to make rest and digest matter. Take your sleep seriously. Don't discard it. This is how you will thrive. You will thrive through this pandemic. You will thrive through all this stress with your workload based on these things: a plant-based diet, fasting, being yoga, meditation. These are all your tools. I know it sounds overwhelming, but just start somewhere. Pick one thing that you heard about today that you want to do. Promise to yourself that you will try to do it for at least 21 days. You will change your habit, and one good thing will lead to another good thing. So with that, I think I will leave you with my wish for all of you. Being an internist, I know I'll go out of business, but I do wish that you have a rare condition called good health. And frankly, we as physicians, we're not trained on how to deal with that, but this is what I want for you. My book is Body on Fire. It's available on Amazon. It goes over a lot of the things that we talked about today, and I hope you enjoy it. And this is my contact information. Please, feel free to ask questions. We have some time at the end, and also check us out on the website and call us about, trying some of the services we offer. Thank you.
All right, Josh, are you ready for our next section?
Good to go.
Perfect.
All righty. Okay. Thank you, Josie. That was awesome. Crushed it. All right, guys. So today I'm going to talk to you a little about movement, and I'm definitely going to piggyback off of what Dr. Rao talked about, which is just the importance of movement. So a little bit of my background. I'm a strength and conditioning coach, a movement specialist, a personal trainer. I've been working in the Columbia area for about 10 years and was working at a gym until the pandemic, and then we had to adapt and evolve. And now I train mostly people online. My wife and I run a movement learning company called Learn Mobility. And I also take people in personal training one-on-one in my new house. Shout out to Apex Home Loans, because that's where I train people now at my new house. And now today I want to give you just a perspective of how to incorporate more movement in your day, and as well as leave you with some exercises and drills that will actually work on your joint health. So in the fitness industry, if you look at it, like a lot of what the people focus on is just patterns in movement, right? So they focus on like a squat, for example, or planks, or running, or deadlifting. Think of like these just kind of global movements that are pretty signature to what you've seen with people. But when you take a step back, what really makes those movements possible is how well your joints move individually. So if you look at a squat, we all know what a squat looks like, right? It involves bending the ankle, the knee, and the hip, and sometimes the lower spine. Well, what's going to make that movement go well is how well your ankle moves by itself, how well your knee flexes and extends, and how well your hips are able to rotate and flex as well. And if there's something that's going on between one of them, it's going to affect the entire movement. So a lot of what we try to do is teach people how to take care of their joints individually, so that when they actually want to do more exercises, whether programming movement, somebody wants to take up running, or they want to take up tennis, or they want to start going to a fitness class, they have what's called the prerequisite range of motion to do these exercises safely. Now, if we take a step back and look at kind of like the way we teach is there's an evolutionary perspective to health. And this is what we had kind of talked about earlier with Dr. Rao, which he had mentioned about wellness and how we're very overstimulated by society and stuff like that. Is if we look back to what we were designed to do, or what we evolved to do, is we were hunter-gatherers. So we were moving all throughout the day, looking for food, looking for prey to hunt, and just looking at basically how to survive with very physical lives. Now you fast forward, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution in that genome to where we are today. And a lot of us, we don't move enough. We get less than 2,000 or 3,000 steps a day. We sit very much, we sit too often, and we don't inject enough movement into our lives. And because of that, we have these pretty disastrous effects on our health. People's spines are really stiff. Their knees don't move as well. Their hips are constantly tight. A lot of neck pain. And it's really, if you flip the way you look at it, it's really the body just adapting to whatever the environment is. So when somebody gets a stiff spine when they've sat for 6 to 8 hours, there's nothing wrong with the spine other than it's adapting to what it has to do. So what we want to try to do today is give you guys exercises on things you can do Dr. Rao had mentioned stuff like yoga and doing some downward dog, but even downward dog and sun salutations, they have prerequisites. So if you can't get your arm overhead, like if you go overhead, you have a pinch right here, you're going to have a really hard time doing downward dog. You may even potentially injure yourself. So not that those are bad choices, but let's even get a little bit deeper into working on making sure that the joints move well. So what I'm going to do today is just spend most of our time taking you through a sample Kinstretch class. So Kinstretch is a movement enhancement system. Think of it like yoga, but it's basically where yoga will kind of focus more on taking you through poses and predetermined outcomes. We try to focus on building better resilience and health and movement in the joints. So instead of just doing like something like a pigeon pose, for those of you that know yoga, where you're going to be in a very different position, we're actually going to work on how well the hips move. So if you want to do pigeon, you can do pigeon. If you want to do something else, you can do something else. And so that is what Kinstretch is. Now, well, I will ask that you have some space to stand around. If we have enough time, we might do some stuff on the ground. A couple just things to go over is that if one of the things we want to avoid today is pain. So if we feel pain during any of the movements, I want you to either make the movement smaller. So we have what's called a controlled articular rotation. You also hear me call it CARS, that's the acronym. And what that basically means is that we're going to take our joints through their full range of motion. And some people may feel a pinch or burning. There may be something going on with that joint. We can't problem solve that today over a Zoom call, but what I want you to do is to make that circle even smaller. So if we're going through our neck, for example, and you start to feel a pinch here in your neck, rather than going through that pain point, just try to avoid it. Almost think of like a Pac-Man circle. So instead of just doing a full circle, you'll skip that part and then continue along with that circle. Likewise, we'll have kind of degrees of tension. So degrees of tension is think of 0% or 100%. So 0% tension or intention is basically hanging out on the couch. There's very little tension at all. 100% is like lifting the heaviest weight you've ever lifted or trying to push your car out of the snow. It's like a maximal effort. For the most part today, for safety reasons, we're going to stay within 30 to 40%, maybe 50% of our overall maximal effort. So when you hear me say those percentages, just keep that in mind. And the last thing is, I know we have at least one pregnant person on the call, but we may have others, but please use your best judgment. So if stuff feels a little bit sketchy, just take a break, just learn, listen to the cues, or try to modify the position. I'll give cues as well so that all of us can get out of it, get as much as we can out of it. And if you want, you can turn your cameras on. It's no problem if you don't want to. I can actually start to give cues if I start to see things going on. But otherwise, let's just go ahead and get into our sample Kinstretch class. So we're going to start standing. If you can just clear some room, stand up a little bit, and we're going to start off working from the head down. So the first thing we'll be working on is our neck, okay? So again, this is a neck car controlled articular rotation. I want you to watch me first because you can't watch and do the neck at the same time, and then I'll start to give you cues for that. So my goal is with my neck, I'm gonna keep the rest of my body at about a 20 to 30% maximal effort. So I'm just stiff enough that I'm not gonna move. So when I move my neck, I don't wanna move my knees, I don't wanna move my wrist. I just wanna think literally from the collarbones up is what I'm gonna try to move. Jaw will be closed. I want you to start to stiffen up your body, maybe 40% now. So just keep tension like a fist and then watch me move. I'm basically gonna flex my neck down. I've scraped the collarbone to the right. Dip my right shoulder past my ear. I look up as far as I can, trying to trace the biggest circle I can. I look to the upper left. And then I scrape my left collarbone back down, across. And then I come up. So that was just a visual rep. So let's go ahead and try that together. So we know basically, let's make a circle with our neck. Again, let's not go in any pain. So go ahead and get in your position. Just follow my cues. Stiffen your body up. I want you to keep your jaw closed and then start to flex down as far as you can. Now, without opening up your jaw, scrape your right collarbone with the underside of your chin as much as you can. Keep looking, lead with your eyes. See if you can look past your right shoulder and then look all the way up to the ceiling. Again, avoiding any kind of pinch points. And then go to the upper left corner. Jaw goes right down to the top of that left collarbone, and then start to scrape back to the center, and then stack back up to that starting position. And then let's go to the other side. So we're going to go flex down. Pull that visual. We'll flex down. The light's a little bit off. There we go. Perfect. And then go to the left. Look past the left shoulder, all the way up to the ceiling, keeping that jaw closed. And while you're doing this, notice, we talked about meditation earlier, let's concentrate on if we feel that we're moving other parts of our body. So try to keep the rest of the body stiff. And with our cars, we're trying to just isolate as much of the intended joint as we can. So for neck, we're just going to be moving our neck, coming back to the center. Let's go one more rep on our own. We're going to flex down, rotate to the right, look past the right shoulder, looking up. Remember, motion is lotion. So if you can inject more movement into your day, you're going to have a way better response for your body. You're going to be teaching your body how to move more. So we talked about sitting, how we don't want to sit, right? So this is just things to inject in between your day when you have those pockets of time. Let's go the other way as you finish up that rep. So we're going to go one more towards the left. And again, if you have any pinch points, anything that doesn't feel good, try to make your circle smaller. Imagine as if you were trying to trace a circle with your nose. How wide can you make that circle pain-free? That's the key word though, pain-free. Excellent job. Now, let's start off with our shoulder. So the shoulder, right, if we're gonna go on our right shoulder, when we move our shoulder, one thing we don't wanna move is our elbow or our spine. So we're gonna keep tension throughout our body, and we're just gonna try and trace a circle. So we'll go together on this one because you can watch and do with this. So keep your body tense. I want you to open up your right hand. So open up as far as you can. If you look at your elbow pit, how far does your elbow pit roll out? Keep your elbow as straight as you can. Fingers are going to be as long as they can as well. And then I want you to cross the center line of the body. And once you cross, keep going. Keep that elbow straight. Bring your bicep over toward your ear. Excellent. Once you hit that first road point, I want you to pretend like you're turning your ear or your bicep away from your ear, or you're trying to spill water down to the ground. As you do that, reach as far as you can behind you. When you do that, try to hide your hand behind your back. And then when you come to the side, if you were in a watch, your watch should be touching the side of your hip. So the back of your hand should be right there. Now in this position, let's go ahead and reverse. So we reach back. Again, not moving through the spine. You're going to hit your first roadblock. Once you're there, pretend like you're opening up a doorknob behind you. We would call this external rotation. I won't give you too much anatomy today, but just open up that shoulder as much as you can. Now, zip line your bicep towards your ear. So you're just going to retrace the same path that we took. As we do this, body will cross. And then we come back. Excellent job. Let's get another rep like that now that we know what to expect. So give me a big inhale. Pack that air down to your lower abdominal. I want you to just stiffen up your body. Again, 40%, so nothing crazy, about half of your effort. And this is just to isolate the shoulder. Cross the midline of your body with your shoulder as rotated out as you can. Avoid any pinch points. Let's go ahead and find bicep to ear. Once we're here, we have our first roadblock. Let's turn bicep away from the ear as we reach back. So a car is just basically practicing shoulder. So right now, how well does your shoulder move? How big is your circle? That is our outcome measure for this, is over time, we want to improve the circle that we have in our joints. Let's reverse that. So reach back. Try to keep the hand in a straight line. Once you hit that first roadblock, externally rotate, open up. Bicep goes toward the ear. Keep tension. Imagine you're going through about 30% thicker air. So you're gonna generate your own tension. as you come through, crossing the midline and then back. Let's go this time to the left. So now we have a side to compare. We have left and we have right. So let's see how the left does. Externally rotate or rotate your hand all the way out. Bicep and elbow pit should be pointed to the side. Cross the midline of your body. And as you do that, keep your fingers as straight as they can be. Don't let your elbow bend. Keep it as long as you can. Remember, we're only doing shoulder right now. Bicep by the ear, and like a periscope, I want you to turn your shoulder away from your body, keeping the elbow straight, and then reach back as far as you can, reaching your arm behind your back towards the side of the body. Great job. Go ahead and reverse now. Reach up. You hit that first roadblock where you can't go into a straight line anymore. Open up that doorknob behind you, externally rotate that shoulder, bicep towards the ear, and come all the way down. And let's do one more time. So CARS for us, if you were a client, we would come in, we would assess you based off of how well your joints move, and then we can make training decisions based off of that. But even if you're just doing it on your own, start doing this every day, and you can start to see how the shoulder functions and where you need more work. And while you're doing this, think about, where am I more connected? Where am I least connected? Do I rush through certain areas of my circle? Am I going around pain? The beauty of this is that over time, it's just like brushing your teeth. It's just like flossing. You start to get to know your anatomy more, and then we can start to make more changes over time. All right, so we've done our shoulder, we've done our neck, we've done our shoulders. Let's go into our wrists. Now the wrists take a beating with a lot of desk work. This is going to be a fun one. When I have my NFL linemen do this, it's the hardest one that they do, and they can't even believe it's that difficult. So I'm going to give you a little close-up of the wrist. Now, when I move my wrist, what I don't want to do when I go into my wrist circle is, notice I have a watch. And what I don't want to do is move my watch like that, because this is more of my elbow. So what I'll have you do is, you're just going to have your hand out, okay? And for right now, we're just going to imagine that your favorite beverage is on there. It could be water, it could be wine. If you listen to Dr. Rao, it's actually a good thing. It could be coffee, whatever you want, okay? Some people want scotch. So put your favorite beverage on your hand. Now, when you go to move your wrist, I don't want you to spill your beverage. So let's start off, our fingers will be extended. I want you to pull your wrist into what we call flexion. So just the hand itself, the palm, is going to go directly towards the body. Now, we're going to go towards the center. As we do that, we're going to let the hand extend as much as it can, and you'll literally let the hand go towards the center, and then you pull the hand back, and then go to the outside. So this is the range of motion. Let's go ahead and practice that. And again, what I don't want to see, all right, this was some kind of brandy or whatever, I don't want to see that fall off. So squeeze, let's keep going the same direction, and we're just going to practice wrist. And you'll find is that your hand, you start making shadow puppets, right? You start making these little dinosaur shapes with your fingers. But unfortunately, that is not wrist. So we're just trying to isolate this thing right here. So keep going that same direction. No pain. Can't see most of your faces now, but you may be making funny faces because it feels really weird. You get some weird mouth postures from there. That's okay. And then go ahead and reverse direction. So we talked about prerequisites. If you can't get your wrists in almost a 90-degree angle, push-ups are not going to be a good idea, because you don't have the range of motion to load push-ups. You can still do push-ups on handles. So for those of you that have a fitness program, keep that in mind while you're going through this. Think about, wow, what ranges of motion do my joints have to do in the exercises that I pick? So just keep that in mind with your wrist. Now let's go ahead and switch to the other wrist. Now we have a left and right to compare. So again, we have our favorite beverage on our left. Extend your fingers. Go ahead and flex your wrist up as far as you can. Once you're there, adduct or drop to the center, and then pull your wrist back towards your body. So we call that extension, and then go towards the outside, abduction. So continue that range of motion. Try to make the quality of the circle as good as you can, meaning that there's very little glitches or hiccups or anything like that. No motion in the fingers, and just express as much range of motion in that wrist as you can. and then go ahead and reverse. We'll do the same thing. Do not spill your alcohol or water. Great job. So again, when we move, right, when we move, we're practicing what we want to be in the future. So if you sit too long, you're just going to be practicing to have a spine like a shrimp, right? Nobody wants to have a shrimp spine. But when you move, you get up, you inject some nutritious motion where you're expressing as much range of motion in the joint as you can that's pain-free. You're not only making yourself feel better now in the future, but you're influencing the cells that are going to replace your current cells 2, 3, 6 months from now. So that's why you are your habit. So our goal today is to give you a couple tools to make movement a more accessible habit throughout your day. Let's go to the hip. So we're going to do standing hip. Now the hip's mean. Okay, there's a lot of meat here to move. So it's a big joint to move. So when you're going to do it, make sure you have something to use for balance. So if I was by the wall, so you can go by a wall, or if you have a chair to hold on, I'm going to use a stick. It doesn't matter. Let's work with our right hip if we can. So my hip moves exactly like the shoulder, okay? Basically, if I'm going to stand on one leg, my right hip, I'm going to cross the center of the body with my hip, try to bring my ankle up as high as I can. Now, from here, you're going to keep this motion. So try to keep it as level as you can. Go to the outside. You'll hit your first roadblock. Once from there, internally rotate. Didn't mean to do much anatomy, but try to spin your hip as far as you can the other way so that your ankle goes higher than your knee. And then scrape your hip back to the center. And then it's right under you. Now let's reverse. Kick your knee back. Lift your ankle and your knee up at the same time. You're going to hit that roadblock again. Swivel your ankle underneath your knee and up to the center, and then cross the body back the same way you came. Let's do the same hip. We're going to go slow again. Now, I'm going to pepper in some more cues. Some people will be bending their other knee when they do that, or they'll be moving too much through their pelvis. Try to let that motion go and be as stiff as you can through the body and only move through the hip. So same thing, cross the center with the right hip, lift up as much as you can. So ankle and knee are trying to race at the same time. Once you're at that point, again, avoid any pinches you have, circle all the way out, pause, try to lift your ankle higher than your knee by swiveling it the other way, pause, trace your knee back behind you, and then underneath. Let's reverse. Squeeze your body, make it into a fist, reach back, lift ankle and knee up, swivel your ankle underneath your knee, and then come all the way back down. Great job. Let's go ahead and switch sides. So remember, quality of motion, right? When we're going through this no pain, express as much as you can. It's probably very unfamiliar if you're not used to moving your hips in this way. That's okay. It's just like practice. So let's go with the left hip. Cross the center. Ankle and knee are going to try to lift up at the same time. It's okay if they don't. It's all about the intention. Pause. Go to the outside. Lift the ankle higher than the knee. And then trace your knee behind you as far as you can without going into your lower spine. Keep it as in the hip as you can. Go ahead and reverse. Kick back. Ankle and knee will lift up. Hit that match point right there. Ankle swivels under. Cross and come down. Let's get one more on that left. And while you're doing this, compare this to your experience on the right side. Do you have more range of motion, less range of motion? What different sensations do you have? Cross over. We call this internal rotation of the hip. You're just going to spin your femur down to the ground. Lift up. Reach back. Come down. And go ahead and reverse. Great job. All right, now we get to make our way down to the ground. Yay, we don't have to stand up. So we'll be working on what's called a cat-cow, a segmental cat-cow. So some of you who may have been exposure to yoga or things like that, you may have kind of heard of this and seen this motion, but basically we are going to try and segmentally, mean one at a time, move each individual vertebrae of our spine. So remember, motion is lotion. When you don't have motion in an area of a joint, that joint starts to become arthritic over time. Arthritis is not a disease that you caught from the girl at the dance last night. Arthritis is a process that happens over decades and decades of basically inadequate use or neglect of a joint. So one of the things that we can do is, again, I'm sounding like a broken record, but really it's that simple, is try to inject as much healthy, pain-free movement into your day as you can. Cat-cow is great. Everybody loves the cat-cow, especially the way we teach it, which is real segmented. So, by the way, if you have spine issues, just be mindful with this. Not that you can't do it, but don't push through pain. So if you have any kind of herniations and stuff, and you start to feel any nervy stuff, burning, tingling, just be mindful of that. I don't want to set up any kind of sciatica that you may already have. So just use your best judgment. But essentially, we're going to get on the ground, and we'll be on all fours. So notice that my hips are directly on top of my knees. I'm not too far back, and I'm not too far forward. My shoulders are pretty much on top of my wrist. Now, if your wrist, as we talked about earlier, that if you don't have extension in your wrist, that this doesn't feel comfortable, you can move your hands a little bit further out so that you're not jamming into your wrist, or you can turn your hands out to the side. Either one does not matter. I just don't want the wrist to be a limiting factor while we work our spine. Now, in this position, we have two different endpoints. We have flexion of the spine, which is up, and we have extension of the spine, which is where I'm looking up and my spine goes down. So let's start off in what we call the cat or flexion. So I just want you to drive your entire spine up to the ceiling, as far up as you can, whatever that means. Again, not going any pain. And I'm literally trying to, I look like a Halloween cat. Like I'm just trying to touch the ceiling with my spine. Now from here, see if you can look as far past your knees as you can. And you're going to keep that point with your eyes. Now, I want you to start to stick your tailbone out. Don't move your head or your upper spine yet. We're only moving the lower spine. So stick your tailbone out and imagine creating a stairwell and extending your vertebrae of your spine piece by piece. So I'm letting the spine start to sink down. And then finally, I start to look up with my head. And now we are in what's called spinal extension. In this position, look up as high as you can with your eyes. Hold that point, and then slowly start to tilt your pelvis, or think about scooping your belt buckle up to your spine. And we're going to reverse that. So we start to flex segment by segment in the upper or the mid spine, and then the upper spine, and then finally finishing with the neck. So that is cat-cow. Now let's just take several more reps and get even into more detail with that. So go ahead and reverse. Keep your upper body where it is. Start to stick your tailbone out. Arch your back. Let your mid back follow the lower back. And then ride that momentum as you start to go through the upper spine. You almost feel your chest sink. Don't let your elbows bend. Keep your arms straight. And then finish off by looking up with your head. Let's do it again. So exhale. Tuck your belt buckle in, so it's almost like your belly button's going to touch the inside of your spine, the front of your spine, and try to keep your head exactly where it is till the last second. So keep reaching, and now move through the mid spine, trying to touch the ceiling, and then finish with the head. Let's give one or two more good reps like this. Stick the tailbone out, call this flexion of the spine. And while you do this, or an extension of the spine, while you do this, imagine contracting all the tissue on your back to make this possible. So this is a meditation of itself. You're practicing yourself. That's the whole point of Kinstretch, is to practice your body like you would an instrument. All right, last time, find full flexion. So go slow and imagining all of your vertebrae are contributing to this movement. So pull your belly in, press the ground away, and try to express all of the available range you have in your spine. Excellent job. If there's one thing you get away from today, please do cat-cows. You know, I know you all work very, very hard, and typically you're probably going to be in seated position. So if you can at least remember the cat-cows, we'll have links. We'll send you guys stuff too to remember the other ones. But taking care of your spine is one of the biggest things, because the spine is an anchor point for the body, and the rest of the body has to move around the spine. So if the spine doesn't have great quality information coming to it because it doesn't move as well, it's going to have problems down the chain, shoulders, hips, and stuff like that. So those were a sample of some of the cars. We have a little more time left. I'm actually going to get into some stretches we can do for the hips. All right, so we're going to do targeted stretching. So the first thing we'll be doing is what we call a 90-90. So a 90-90, we'd have to be on the ground. And we call it a 90-90, so my right leg would be forward and my left leg would be back. In this position, it looks like I have a 90-degree angle in my knee, and also relation to my hip of my body, on my front leg, and also on the back leg. I'll give you just a slightly different angle. So 90-90 on both sides. Now, if this is not comfortable, you cannot sit all the way up, that's totally fine. You can take your right hand and reach out to the side. So now we don't feel a pinch here. Some people may not have that available mobility in their hips to be able to sit like that. Another way you can modify is you can bend your knees a little bit like that, so you're taking some pressure off. Okay, so 2 ways to do it again is, if you cannot sit all the way up like this, totally okay. Right hand will become a kickstand. If you have a yoga block, some of you may have that, you can also put that under your hip, onto your right hip, which will give you a little bit more of a ramp, or you could bend your knees. So a combination of all those. We say 90-90, but it doesn't really matter if it's 90-90. What really matters is that we can stretch the hips. So we're actually going to work on what's called a trail leg hip. So in this case, this is our left hip. And if you feel it in your knee, again, you can bend your knee a little bit and just move yourself in a position where you don't feel it. Now, the goal here is we're trying to actually access the capsule of the hip, the deepest stuff of the hip. So if the hip moves better on the deeper tissue, the rest of the hip will move better. So we define a joint as a space between 2 bones, right? And there has to be that space. So if there's no space in the hip, you don't have a lot of motion, it's going to cause issues down the road. It's also going to kind of attribute to arthritis. It can cause a lot of other compensations, back pain, things like that. So that's why we tackle the hips first for a lot of people. Take your left hand, you can make a C. I want you to put that right on your hip bone, okay, right, maybe right above where your pocket would be. All you're going to think about is trying to pull your hip up to your head. So if you see my hand, when I shift my hip, my hand actually goes a little bit towards my head. It's not a lot, it's a little more subtle. As you do that, keep that position and then try to sit back in your hip. And when you do this, you pull up to your head and you sit back in the hip, you're going to feel a pretty good stretch in that hip. Some of you already may feel it. You may feel it in the front, and it kind of spirals to the outside. It almost feels like a hip fracture, like you're going to fracture your hip. You're right there. That's exactly where we want you to be. We don't want you to fracture your hip, but if it feels like that, that's good, because that's probably the deepest stuff. You may also feel it in the back where the sit bone is. So anywhere you feel that's deep in the hip where you can't quite pinpoint it, that's what we call the hip capsule. That's exactly where we want you to be. Now, while we're here, let's hold this passive position and think about some inhales and exhales. So I want you to give me a big inhale. Exhale. Keep that position. Try to sink a little bit deeper into that stretch. Let's get another big inhale. Exhale. Sink a little deeper. Now we're getting more of that parasympathetic state that Jyoti was talking about, Dr. Rao, is now we are incorporating breathing with our movement. From here, it's not enough just to get to this position and stretch. We actually want to build strength here. So we're going to be doing isometrics, and isometrics are basically just muscle contractions without movement. And we have basically 2 things that are called pales and rails. I'm not going to go into exactly what they mean, but basically I'm going to have you push and pull out of the stretch. So I'll give you some cues to make that happen. Imagine there's a scale underneath your left ankle, and that scale right now is reading 0% of your effort. You're passive. There's not going to be a lot of effort right now. Start to press your left ankle down into that scale using the tissue that's being stretched. So that's pressing that. So all the stuff that you feel in your hip, I want you to press down. So if I was not on the ground, my hip would look like this. That's exactly what I'm trying to do, but there's going to be no movement from this position. So let's start off with that contraction, about 20% pressing into the ground. Don't lose your position. Keep your breathing. Go to 40% of your overall effort. Start to press down into the ground. You're going to feel more of that tissue engaged that's being stretched. Excellent. Go to 60% of your overall effort. You'll start to feel the rest of your body engage as well. You can squeeze your legs, you can squeeze the rest. Again, only go to what's in your comfort. If you're good at 40%, and I call out 70, stick at 40%. Go to about 75% of your effort, pressing down into the ground. See how much connection you can derive in your hip. Hold that position. Hold for 5, 4, pressing down, 3, 2, and now reverse rails or pull off the ground. Imagine trying to lift your ankle off the ground as if you were going to do that, but don't do it. Just squeeze all the tissue as if you were going to do that. Hold that. So all the stuff on the outside of the hip should be firing. Some of you, I can't tell, but it happens all the time, may be cramping. That's okay. Just come out of the position and then get back into it, or back out of the intensity a little bit. Maintain that rails connection or that pulling connection. Hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent job. Slowly let that go. We'll just do one set today. We're going to be nice. Now, let's go to the other side. So just imagine if you need to, you can move away from your hips. You take your hands and move further from your body. Press the outside of your right ankle on the ground. So the whole entire right leg is pressed on the ground. I want you to point your left foot, extend left foot, and then imagine peeling your leg off the ground as far as you can. So my left leg is peeling off the ground. Left heel will scoop under. Right leg presses down until my right leg has to come up. And I'm in this kind of bear position. And then we transition to a 90-90 on the other side. So all we'll do is we'll press the left leg down, and then right leg will come down, and we'll be in 90-90 on the other side. Same rules apply if you need to modify by bending the knees or moving your left hand away from your body. That's totally okay. And we're going to take our right hand, put it on top of that pocket that we talked about earlier, and then start to pull the right hip up to the head. So you're just thinking about just pulling your leg, pulling your hip towards your body, and then rotating towards the right with the rest of the body. So the femur or the thigh is pinned down. We rotate and we find the stretch deep in the right hip. Again, you may feel it in the front as a spiral. You may feel it in the back as part of the capsule as well. It does not really matter at this point. I just want you to find that you have a stretch in the hip. And it's uncomfortable, but I don't want it to be so painful that you can't last. So you might have to back out of that a little bit as well. Once you're there, go ahead and start some big inhales and exhales. So with this inhale, fill in as much air as you can. Exhale, sink deeper into the stretch. Trying to get parasympathetic. Let's do it one more time. Big inhale. Exhale, sink a little deeper. Now we're at length, meaning we should feel like we're at the bottom of the hip. We're at a full range of motion. This is called internal rotation for the anatomy nerds out there on the right hip. Let's start our isometrics that we did earlier. So we have that scale again. It's under the right ankle. It's reading 0%. Use the tissue that you feel being stretched. Start to press your right ankle, although it's coming from the right hip, into the ground, about 10%, and stabilize. Contract the tissue around the hip. Now let's add even more directionality to it. Press down about 30% of your effort, pressing down into that scale, hold. Start to squeeze the rest of your body too. So not only are we building flexibility, which is just passive range of motion, we're trying to build mobility, which is strength in that range of motion. It doesn't help to just be flexible. We need to be strong in those ranges of motion. That's how we're doing it right now. Give me 50 to 60% of your overall effort. So you're just contracting, stay within your safety limits, hold for 5. Now press harder at 75%, squeeze. Feeling all that tissue around the hip. 5, 4, 3, 2. Flip the hip and try to reverse in rails or trying to lift that right ankle off the ground. Squeeze all the stuff on the outside of the right hip. Hold, but don't actually lift off the ground if you can. You're just trying to pretend, but you're not faking on effort. You're just not moving the hip. So squeeze as much as you can. Hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let that tension go, breathe. Excellent job. Now let's transition to a bear position, which we kind of visited a little bit on the way over. By the way, if you can spend more time on the ground and less in a chair, you're probably going to get a little bit more mobile, because the ground kind of forces you to basically adapt to it, and you'll find yourselves in a lot of different positions. So Dr. Rao talked a lot about diversity in your diet. Well, you also need diversity in your movement diet. You need to find different positions to put your body into. So it's just like monocrops, right? One of the big problems with monocrop cultures is that you plant, for example, corn in the same soil every year, so you deplete the same nutrients. Well, the same thing is a lot of times with sedentary lifestyles, your body does the same patterns, the same lines of tissue that you're loading. So this is why we talk about injecting more movement. So if you can find more stuff on the ground, just sitting on the ground or doing some of the stuff we did today, you're going to get different types of movement variability in your diet, and your joints are going to be happy for it. So take your left leg, press it down into the ground, till your right leg off the ground, and try to open up that right hip as much as you can. Keep pressing your hips apart, and then eventually you're going to meet me in what we call bear position. So this is bear position. Now, some people will have the mobility that they can put their hands on their hips like that, and they can lean forward. Totally cool. Some people will have to lean far back, and like that's their range of motion. Again, that's 100% okay. You're just going to have to pretend like you're pressing your arms down when we do our isometrics. Totally fine. Just find the position. So you have anywhere from here, where you can roll back to here, or you can lean back as far as you can, and you probably already feel the stretch there if you have if that's at the range of your mobility. Once there, and whether you have your hands on your thighs or you don't, let's take a couple big inhales and exhales. So let's work on into that parasympathetic state. So big inhale, expand your rib cage with breath. Exhale, sink a little deeper into that stretch. Another big inhale. And then exhale, sink a little deeper. Some people get turned off by the concept of meditation. They think it sounds woo-woo. So I'm going to flip it, and let's just call it concentration. Like, do you think your life would be better if you could concentrate better? I'm assuming most of you are shaking your heads like, yeah, if I could concentrate better, the quality of my thinking would be better. That's all meditation is, right? It's just some people use breath, they use other things as a point of focus. Well, right now, this is our point of focus. Like our body is our instrument that we can focus on. So I really want you to concentrate on letting those hips go, settling with that stretch reflex that you feel, and just melting that away. Now, in this position, we're going to do those isometrics again. Okay, so again, if you're here, just pretend like you're going to squeeze up. But if you have your hands on your hips, however they are, give me a big inhale. Squeeze your abdominals, pressurize your torso with tension, and now start to press your elbows into your knees and your knees into your elbows. The goal here is to fire all of that inner thigh stuff, and you're using your arms as a wedge to get more tension out of that. So slowly start to increase your tension, maybe 20% of your overall effort. So more effort than chilling on a couch, but you're not pushing your car out of the snow. Then go to 40%. As you do that, you start to squeeze the rest of your body, as much of your, what we call your bioflow or your tissue as you can. Let's go to 60%. And if you're good at 20%, stay there, right? If you can go up to 60%, keep pressing into your hips, hold for 5, 4, 3, 2. Now we're going to do the opposite. We call it rails or pull. Pull your knees down to the ground. So reverse the effort. Squeeze all the stuff on the outside of your butt as if you're trying to increase the stretch actively. If you have your hands on your knees, try to pull your knees away from your elbows. If you're leaning back, just imagine that you're pulling your knees closer to the ground. You're going to feel the increased stretch on the inner thighs, but you'll also feel a lot of stuff going on the outside of the hip. Hold that for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent job. Breathe. Sink deeper into that stretch. Now we're going to finish it. We're going to save the work. So saving the work is we're going to use the range of motion that we just worked on. So that was kind of the theory, and now we have the practical. And so it does us no good if we just isolate range but we don't use it. So we're going to actually go into our hip cars, but we'll do it from a quadruped position. So the same thing that we did standing, where we were moving our hips together, we're going to do it from a different position, which means gravity is going to challenge us a little bit differently. So I want you to go ahead and go back into quadruped, similar to what we did with our cat-cow. Let's do our left hip together. So imagine you have a fishbowl right on your back, all right? You can have waves in the fishbowl, but you can't knock the bowl over. Your left hip, you're going to bring your left knee up to your chest without knocking the bowl over, so your spine doesn't move too much. Kick your left knee out to the outside, and then lift your left ankle up towards the sky, behind you, and then bring it back under your knee. Let's go ahead and rewind that rep. Kick back now. So it's like you're trying to kick something above you with your heel, with your knee bent. Bring your knee and your ankle at the same height towards the outside of your body, as far as you can, and then pull it back in to the center. Let's get another rep in. This time, don't let the elbows bend. Go ahead and pull knee to chest. Knee to the outside, ankle up. Reach up as high as you can, and then come back. Reverse that rep. Boomerang back to where you came. Take the same path. Add more tension now. Imagine fighting the air. It's about 60% thicker. So I'm going to ask a little bit more tension out of you. Let's get one more good rep. Big inhale. Pressurize yourself. Lift. And just try to trace a circle with your kneecap, only moving from the hip. And then reverse. Don't let the knees bend. And then bring it back. Awesome job. Let's go ahead and hit the right hip. Pull the knee to chest. Reach out. Trace that circle, pulling the knee back under. And then kick back and reverse. Give me another good rep now. Keep those elbows straight. And again, concentrate on the quality of your range of motion. That's all this is. This is the practice of you. It's not squatting. It's not tennis. Those things are great, but they don't practice you. You're trying to learn how well do your joints move? Where do you have gaps of connection? Let's get one more good rep. The better body you build, the better body you can bring to the activities that you enjoy. And that's what we're focusing on. Finish this last rep, trying to make the best circle you can out of that hip. Excellent job. So that is a sample of Kinstretch and some of the work that we do, whether online or in person. And thank you so much. I see mostly names and blank screens, but I'm assuming you guys didn't fuck off and you tried and you did it as well as you could. And I'm going to pass it off to Kim. So thank you guys.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. That was so beneficial. I have a chronic neck and back injury, so I'm like all the movement and stretching, especially the yoga. So I'm going to try to do a quick screen share. So please let me know if you guys are not able to see this. Okay, let me go into, can you guys see everything okay? Okay, and how's the sound? Good, okay. So my name's Kim Wilson. I am a holistic health coach here in Maryland, but I also work virtually. So I'm going to cover, there's so much to talk about. So I welcome you all to reach out to me if you have any questions, concerns. Thank you so much to the speakers today. The content was phenomenal. I'm going to talk to you guys today about nourishing foods for holistic well-being. So we're looking at the mind, body, spirit, heart, things like that. So much of what was discussed today, I am a huge advocate of. I may piggyback on a couple of things because as much of a sexy word as it is, gut health is something that I talk about too. But I'm going to go over some things using a different approach that y'all may have heard before So I welcome you to be a little open-minded to some things that you may hear. And again, ask any questions that you may have. So one of the things that I coach on is something called bio-individuality. So one person's fuel, one person's pleasure, source of food, maybe somebody else's pain. So if we're looking at like somebody who has celiacs, but somebody who lives in Italy, even though the food's different here than it is, in different places, we are our own unique blueprint. So a lot of times we see people jumping on different like diet trains or systems, but it's really important that we look at our own bio-individual approach because we all are uniquely designed. We have a very unique gut microbiome. It's extremely important that we look at ourselves as the individual. One of the things that I do focus on when I work with people, depending on their goals, is gut health and food sensitivities, which I will touch on today. So there is different methods, whether you're working with a doctor, whether it's testing, elimination experience, which I can help you do to discover those unique things about your body. But during this pandemic, especially, this time has really encouraged us to get back to our roots, get back to simplicity, get back to the basics. Everything from pivoting to how we're grocery shopping to looking at the foods that we're eating. I'm a big canner, like the ball can. It was so hard to find this summer. So many people were growing gardens. I love to see all this stuff, quality time, gardening, things like that. So I'm going to talk to you guys about something called primary foods and secondary foods. So this is a unique approach to nourishment that I'm going to share. So when we look at primary foods, these are the things that bring us that fulfillment in life. Okay. So it's our fuel for life. It's the things that give us energy, that really fuels us. Like if you think about when we were children, the things that brought us joy, that nourished our body and our mind, right? The things that we're passionate about. So these are non-food foods, but these are the things that fuel us. Okay. So, we've had to pivot in the area of primary foods, especially during this pandemic. We've developed different ways of building relationships. Careers are definitely, look at us right now. We're moving a lot of businesses online, looking at spirituality, movement, joys, and creativity. So these are what we call primary foods. And what we're discovering, and I will go into food, nourishment, fuel shortly, but what we're discovering is that oftentimes people are really feeling non-nourished or malnourished in their primary foods, and it's resulting in binge eating, selecting poor choices of food, sugar, alcohol. We're seeing, as was mentioned today, a spike in people using a lot of alcohol, whether it's to stay busy, to numb. Some of the background and stuff that I work in is trauma. So we're seeing all these different things in the health industry coming into play. So I really encourage y'all, as I'm going through this and moving forward, what's going on in your primary foods and is it affecting your secondary foods, which we'll go into shortly. But I encourage you to look at these different categories right now and what they look like in your life at this current time. Self-care, I've become like the self-care queen. And I can say this because I was once that person that poured from an empty cup and it did not serve me well. The thing about self-care is that you cannot show up for your families, for your community, for your business, for whatever it is, whatever category of your life, if you're running on E. Okay. So we talked about sleep, imperative. We talked about different forms of movement. Like I'm going to talk to y'all about nourishing foods, but whatever it is, you have to put your oxygen mask on first. And I say that to a lot of people because so often we think we got to put ourselves on the back burner. I got to wear all the hats first. And then if I have time, maybe I'll take care of me. And you're running on E, and that does not serve you well. So it's really important to look at what are your self-care practices, what are your healthy habits, really touching on a lot of what was discussed today, and where can you pour into your primary foods. So I encourage you all to reflect on your current lifestyle, the whole holistic approach, right? Mind, body, spirit. What is supporting you during this time, and where can you make a pivot and a shift to some of your daily, weekly, monthly practices that you can crowd out certain things and you can add in things that are going to nourish you in a better sense. and where can you make simple, small adjustments? I think that when we talk about health and wellness, people think, especially going into a new year, I got to change everything right now. And then they end up like, give it a week. And then there's frustration, shame, guilt, blame, and it's just very toxic and it's not positive. So I encourage you all to shift moving into a new year, looking at what intentions you want to set, not what resolutions you want to make. There's a big difference. And if you guys want to talk more about that, I welcome you to reach out to me or any of the speakers. So secondary foods, I know that we had talked a lot about nourishment and nutrition. Gut health, again, is my jam. It's really, really, really imperative. As the doctor, mentioned, it is the epicenter of our immune system. It's where a lot of disease starts. It is so connected, as she mentioned as well, to our brain. So what we're putting in our body, how we're digesting food, how we're taking care of ourselves, what we're surrounding ourselves with internally, externally, all play into how we feel, think, act, believe. It is all intertwined. Okay. So, kind of talking about some of the food stuff around gut health, as the doctor mentioned earlier, and as I'm emphasizing, this is a bio-individual approach. So please be careful when you're hearing what other people are doing, or when you're seeing what programs are out there. Between us and other resources that we have, there's books, conferences, doctors, specialists, different resources that we can give you to help work on that customizable approach for your own bio-individuality. But you really want to focus on what is going on mentally, emotionally, physically, environmentally. There are things like immune system and genetics at play. Stress management, again, that's where the self-care comes in. Stress management tools, as we talked about today, yoga, movement, slowing down. Self-care is not just a bubble bath and a massage. There's so many different things. Grounding right now is free. You can go outside and ground. There's a lot of different free things that you can do. Movement, any kind of movement, getting up and moving throughout the day, whether you're going to the gym or stretching. Also, to piggyback on the yoga of movement, a lot of those poses also help with digestive support, detoxification. So it's helping move things in the body, which is going to help support you in different ways. So when we look at nutrition, we commonly know something, especially here in the US, something called SAD, the Standard American Diet. So it's really important that we're kind of shifting our perspective on what nutrition is. We used to look at the USDA plate. Now we're looking at inflammatory foods. So before, a lot of people would say dairy, it's great for your bones, all this dairy. Well, cows and dairy are not what it used to be when my family owned our farm. Okay. So a lot of things, and I'm not knocking, dairy farmers, they're one of the hardest workers I know. But the food that we have today is very different from what we've had before. So we need to look at what food are we looking at? What are we putting in our bodies? How are we taking care of our bodies? Do we have gut and inflammation and food triggers and stuff going on inside? So that whole thing around inflammatory foods is really important. Gluten and dairy are two of the biggest top triggers. And then we're looking at things like nightshades, eggs, soy, corn. But again, it goes back to that bio-individual approach. But we are so busy and we're so quick, instant gratification that a lot of people are living off of processed foods, sugars, fried foods, things that are disrupting the body and the brain on massive, massive levels. And then you stack on stress, lack of sleep, living in a pandemic with anxiety and stress, and it's just like a ticking bomb for explosion. So it's really important to be focusing on what is it that you're nourishing yourselves internally and externally. So for me, I'm a huge advocate of eating with the seasons. We are meant to flow with the seasons. So you see a lot of like detoxification stuff coming more so in spring and winter. So like right now, spring and fall. So right now we're in winter, right? So we are craving hearty foods, warm foods, soups, stews, heavier foods, okay? A lot of things that are growing right now or being harvested are things that are more like hearty stuff. So you have things like kale. Kale and spinach are two of the biggest superfoods. I can answer any questions about superfoods too, but I will tell you, like you want good hearty greens and good hearty veggies right now. Things like Brussels sprouts, beets are incredible for liver detoxification, things like that. It's really fascinating how different foods are linked to what our body's meant to do naturally. So we're kind of like animals, and also think back to our ancestors. Like, what were they eating? How were they eating? Would they be eating some of the stuff that we're eating today? There's a question for you. But how are we eating with the seasons? We want to be more hibernating, warming our bodies, eating heavier things. We're not craving a bunch of like salads and juices and things like that. That's more spring and summer. Okay, so these are some examples of things that you would be eating with the season. And a lot of these things keep for a long time, especially if stored well, like sweet potatoes, squash. So you can buy them more inexpensive now, and they'll last if you put them in your cellar or a cool, environment. Brussels, phenomenal. I know growing up, we all were forced to eat like the soggy, crappy vegetables. There's so many great ways to prepare these foods, and I'm like a farm to table foodie. So if y'all need some recipe ideas, let me know, because I can help you in that area. But just to let you know. So again, going back to the gut-brain connection, you really want to focus on anti-inflammatory foods. As I mentioned, I have a chronic neck and back injury. I used to be a police officer. I got injured on the job. My injury was a huge pain to purpose. That's part of the reason why I do what I do. So I have to eat anti-inflammatory. Otherwise, my body is in massive pain. Okay. So if you're dealing with a lot of joint problems, pain, inflammation, a lot of it is lifestyle, but it is looking at the food that you're eating. As I mentioned, leafy greens. Avocado is a great, incredible food. Fatty fishes like salmon, berries. Now, I do prefer, if possible, organic. Especially when you're looking at certain foods. I don't have a screen of it now, I'm going to make a note. If you look up the Environmental Working Group, Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen, they put out a list every single year of the foods, and they change. So you may want to check that yearly, of the foods that you can eat that are more likely to be sprayed and consumed with pesticides and toxins and chemicals, and the ones that are least likely. So if you're looking at budgeting reasons, I encourage you to look at that list. Berries is a staple, but they are, as well as tomatoes and things like that, they are more sprayed. So, but I would rather prefer you to eat non-organic and non-certified GMO than to not eat them at all, right? So if you can and it's in your budget, look at that list and consider that as an option. But I'd rather you eat, Costco is great for buying stuff in bulk. A lot of them have been partnering with foods and giving you more bulk, cost-effective ways to be eating healthier. And nuts, everything's from like walnuts. I know nuts can be a trigger for some people, like almonds and cashews. But walnuts, different seeds, these are all great. So we really want to be nourishing the body with these anti-inflammatory foods, looking at the foods that are going to support. I could give y'all a laundry list of so many foods, but these are just some examples. But again, reach out if you have any questions at all. So earlier I mentioned a term called crowding out. So these, are things that we may want to either consume in moderation or really start minimizing in our lifestyle. Things like chemicalized, artificial non-foods. Okay, so for me, I kind of had this philosophy. If you want to, I'm not the fan of the word diet, but if you want to, like, if I were to follow one, it would probably be more Mediterranean. So you're looking at the actual foods. Like, you really can't put in a name that you don't understand with like apple or salmon or avocado. So really look at what the ingredients are. And I encourage you to become a detective of your labels. If you want some more information on that, the Food Babe is a great person to follow. She, I know it's an interesting name, but she does a lot of like detective work around labels. So if you're looking to gain your knowledge more in that area, again, we talked about the standard American diet. Alcohol, yes, red wine does have antioxidants. There are some benefits to alcohol. I like wine and cheese. Trust me, cheese for me, because of the inflammation in my body, I tend to stick to goat and sheep because it is easier on digestion. So just a little note for y'all. But alcohol sales are through the roof right now. And there's a lot of different reasons why that's going on. So I encourage you guys to really think about what is moderation, what is minimal use, and where can, again, you be crowding out some of these things. Artificial sweeteners, caffeine. If you're hitting that slump mid-afternoon, I do like a parfait of superfoods with Greek yogurt, tons of, berries, flax, chia, things like that, instead of going to get the candy bar or the coffee or things that are going to make me crash and feel horrible. Natural, I could have a whole workshop on the term natural in itself. Okay. So be very mindful when it comes to labels of natural. You really want to be looking at things that are more organic, certified, BPA free. Natural is just a marketing term to get people to think that they're eating organic. So I'm not bashing the FDA and the marketing companies, but I will say that natural is a loose term. So be very mindful of that. And then sugar is one of the most toxic things that you can put into your body. It literally is a drug and your body gets really addicted to it. That's one of the things that I work with people to get away from. And it is quite the process, but you can do it. So I would just be mindful, and sugar and sodium is in everything. If you really look at labels, sugar is in so many things. So just be mindful of these things. So when we're talking about nourishment, really look at the areas, primary foods and secondary foods, of where you can really live and work on living that fulfilling life, looking at your self-expression, looking at where you need to work on things in relationships. I know right now, between the pandemic and, different things, not being able to be with family and friends, different things around, that are going on social media. A lot of relationships are being challenged right now, but there's also a lot that are flourishing. So where are you nurturing and nourishing your relationships? What does your food look like? Do you feel fulfilled in your career? Are you adding an enjoyable movement, that self-care and that self-love? Are you creating healthy boundaries, spiritual practice, whatever that looks like for you? It can be your Sunday church with your family. It can be meditation. It can be journaling, whatever it is. Good quality sleep. Again, sleep, I cannot stress this enough. It's so important. And just play and having fun, like getting back to the basics, part of that primary food, like where can we have fun? So just a little fun, little note here. You don't have to do it perfectly. Sometimes mine's the hot mess express, like just as long as you're adding in a couple little things here and there that you can nourish your primary foods and your secondary foods. Just start with the basics, start with a few simple things. And again, my name's Kim Wilson. I am a holistic health coach. I'm also certified in trauma-informed yoga and Reiki. So these are things over the course of my own health journey and working with other people that I've really noticed integrate on so many levels. So I definitely focus on nourishment and nutrition. It is a staple in a healthy life, but there's also so many other areas, as we've talked about today and as I'm kind of touching on, but there's so much more. So if you have any questions, I welcome you to reach out to me. I would love to connect, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate. You want to address the questions?
Absolutely. So first, I want to thank our sponsor again before I forget, Frank Dana with Appraisal Logistics. He was gracious enough to help make this a possibility. So we have, I believe Dr. Rose is going to come back on, but does anybody have any questions specifically for any of our speakers that we had today? They were all wonderful and brought a lot of different things to the table. I know that was a lot to digest, but I think the key here is just picking one thing or one or two like small things to just try to start with. I know that's, makes it a lot easier.
I have a question for Dr. Rao.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about sleep, and I was wondering what your thoughts were on melatonin. A lot of people talk about it being natural and your body makes it anyway. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I use it often. It works. Cortisol is our wake up hormone. It rises when we wake up and it's supposed to fall gradually. A lot of times people don't sleep because their cortisol is not falling because they're wired all the time. Melatonin is our sleep hormone, so it comes up as we sleep. And so if that's the reason you're not sleeping, it's very helpful. Melatonin shuts down when we're exposed to light, when we're looking at our phones or our tablets or our screens before we go to bed. That light, the LED light, tells our brain that it's not time to sleep yet. So if you have those things happening, the melatonin may not work. And melatonin really is a great sleep aid for jet lag and time, travel through time zones and all of that. It works very well. I usually use it in the doses of 1 to 3 milligrams. It can go up to safely 10 milligrams. But you also want to remember that it's not working physiologically in your body because of some of the lifestyle choices that you may be making. So you want to still work on those lifestyle choices, and it does help people fall asleep. If it doesn't work for you, which it doesn't work for everyone, that may not be the issue that you're dealing with.
And you don't see any problem with taking it kind of like on a regular basis, or is this something that you
It
shouldn't?
stops working. It has this ability to stop working after a while, so you won't want to use it regularly.
Anybody else that wants to unmute themselves, you can either ask a question or you can pop it in the chat box too. We'll just give it another minute to see if there's any other questions that come up. All right.
I have a quick question. For any of you, well, it could be directed really towards any of you. Are there anything specifically that are like not CDC guidelines that you would recommend for people going back to the office? I know eventually, we're going to move in that direction, and from what I understand, and I don't, this isn't my background, but from what I understand, even if you get vaccinated, you could still potentially spread COVID. So, as we're kind of moving back to normal, what are some things that you would recommend for all of us to stay healthy that are, above getting sleep and diet?
I can start with that. We don't know enough about the vaccine because we haven't followed it long enough to know whether it's suspected that it reduces disease, which means it reduces your rate of infection and hospitalization and all of that, but we don't know if you would be carrying it. It's likely that you should be protected from carrying it, but we still need everybody to do the safety issues of wearing a mask and 6 feet apart and all of that. The glasses, the screens that are up in a workplace are helpful too. The other thing, the big area that we're not using a lot of is ventilation. So whether in your car or in your home, I know it's hard when it's cold out, but even in workplaces, HEPA filters, filtration systems, opening up the windows, those are also airflow does make a difference. So you can add those things if you have the ability to do that. If the company will, add like little portable filters, I can add that talk too. There's a talk I just heard from a Harvard trained epidemiologist who's done a ton of work in ventilation. And he does have some strong recommendations that he's made for home and work places to do before people start getting back to work. But absolutely wear the mask, stay 6 feet apart. All of that still has to be in place because we don't know, again, what the transmission rate will be with the vaccines.
Dr. Rao, I heard that there's strong correlation between, low vitamin D levels and severity of COVID.
Yeah.
Can you speak on that? Have you heard of about that?
Absolutely. There's been really stress. One of the few vitamins I recommend, a slew of vitamins, and that's also on my website. And I can send you guys links for that. There's a lot of great information that's evidence-based on vitamin D that has been very strongly promoted in areas that have low vitamin D levels, like the Northern hemispheres. There was thinking that was one of the reasons that the immune system modulation with vitamin D is pretty significant. So those with low vitamin D levels tend to have a worse outcome. We're still learning a lot of patterns, but absolutely vitamin D is one of the ones that's pretty solid in the research to show. I think they've said something between 2,000 and 4,000 IUs should be safe for most people to take on a daily basis.
As a follow-up to that, we had another question in the chat box. Any vitamin or supplement recommendations in addition probably to the vitamin D to help immunity?
So that's a great question. So vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams per day. Zinc, 25 to 35 milligrams per day. Melatonin actually is an immune modulator that has also been used in some of the COVID protocols, up to 6 milligrams per day. I personally cannot tolerate 6 milligrams of melatonin. That would make me sleep the whole day long. So I think people have to use these doses as a titratable thing. The other one is quercetin. Quercetin's an herb that actually helps with the immune system. It helps with gut healing. I use it at 500 milligrams twice a day. And the last one is NAC, 600 milligrams twice a day. Those were part of the protocols for COVID. And I'll send you links for what to do to prevent COVID and what to do to if you have COVID, by this really well-researched pulmonary ICU doctor who does these great videos on it.
Awesome.
One of the things I wanted to add into, in addition to this stuff, and I touched on it just briefly, was one of the things that we can do that's free right now is grounding. So getting out into nature, getting exposed to sunlight safely, especially like morning light, grounding, putting your feet into the soil, or, you know, if you live near the beach, into the ocean water, sand, things like that. These are all things that can help build the, you know, immune system, work on that gut health. So Epsom salt baths are great for detoxification, but also helping to nourish. So just different things that you can do for grounding. There are grounding mats. I know that that's helped for a lot of people. So these different things that you can add in addition to.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask what that was. I heard you mention that earlier. Kim, a question for you that just came through was about sugar, and like, what is the maximum amount of sugar, if you're looking at like the back of a nutrition box, that you should be shooting for, in like the grams of sugar per day?
You may actually want to ask the doctor on that one, because she may be a better source. I have to be careful legally of saying how much people can consume things, honestly. And I know that it's case specific on the individual. Dr. Al, do you want to touch on that?
I think it's about 5 teaspoons a day for women, maybe 6 teaspoons a day for men, which is, I think, 25 to 35 grams. That is still a very tall order. I mean, that's still a lot of sugar. That's the maximum. Most Americans are eating way too much sugar. So the new labels will say added sugar versus regular sugar. The old labels did not distinguish between what was found in the food source versus what was added. So you really want to minimize the added sugars to as least as possible. I'd say under 10. I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's 25 grams, but I don't know for sure. I can get back to you on that.
And I'd also be, if you're looking at sugar sources, I would much prefer y'all to be consuming sugar from things like berries, fruit, sweet potatoes, squashes, carrots, bananas, things like that, which are known to have more sugar. Like if you're craving sugar, like goji berries, I love. Cacao, it's actually more of a fat source, but if you're craving chocolate, that's an incredible superfood. For me, like, you want to talk about gut, kombucha. I mean, if you have candida, then that's a whole other issue with sugar. But, you know, kombucha, like what the doctor mentioned, keeping away from added sugars, really looking at the labels, but I'd rather you keep to whole food sugar sources and more superfood sugars than you would like a candy bar.
The other spice that I just want to leave everyone with for sugar is cinnamon. So if you start putting cinnamon as a sugar replacement, it's actually great. It's actually a very nice substitute, but it also helps regulate sugar control. So you can put it in liquids. You can put it on, you know, sometimes I'll have like a banana with cinnamon on it to curb my sugar cravings, along with the berries that she just mentioned. Because, you know, you'll get sugar cravings. You have to realize, why are you getting sugar cravings? Are you anxious? Are you sleep deprived? Are you eating, you know, a low nutritious diet? You know, those are the reasons, more common reasons why people get the sugar cravings. But those are great tools, tips, Kim. I really use them too, actually.
Yeah. And also another thing with sugar, which was touched on, I mean, I know we keep like drilling this sweet sleep situation, but lack of water, dehydration, lack of proper sleep. And I'm not talking about, well, I slept 6 or 7 hours. Like, are you getting good quality REM sleep? And then, you know, even things back to like traumas, personal experiences, things like that can trigger different food things. So really looking at, am I really hungry? What am I really craving? And what's the reason behind it? And that goes back to that primary food that I talked about. So kind of really slowing down, listening to your body and thinking, okay, why am I really craving this right now?
Thank you. That's great. And then we've got one last question. Hopefully we can sneak this one in. CBD / hemp. Is this is something that helps with overall anxiety or sleep aid? I know it's relatively new in the market. Is this or is this not recommended?
I think for me, everything is per case basis. It's a fairly safe compound, but it does have some interactions with certain medications. So you have to be careful. It doesn't do the same thing for everyone. It is a non-central acting agent, means it doesn't do what THC does on the brain. It doesn't alter judgment and things like that. So it's much safer to do. I think that it works really well for anxious people, for sleeplessness. It doesn't work the same for everybody. It also can have potential gut healing effects, and it does work nicely on rashes and muscle aches topically. So I have used it regularly in my practice, but I will tell you that it does not do the same thing for everyone in the same way. So there's a lot of hype behind some of the products, and you want to also make sure that the THC component is negligible. I work with companies that will make sure they will document and basically show you that there's no THC in the product, because some people who get regular screenings it'll show up in your urine test. So you have to be careful about that, but it is a really nice, it has some really good medicinal uses.
Yeah, I also use it too. It's been great for pain management and again, rest, relaxation. But it does go back to, I'm really stressing what the doctor said. It depends on the source. There's everything from how the plant was grown. Was it sprayed? How was it processed? Are there added chemicals and toxins? So you really got to do your research on your products. It's so important because you're really messing with your body and your gut and your endocrine system when you're adding in things that you possibly don't even know that you're adding into your body.
Thank you all so much. This was just such amazing information, and Amanda is going to send up for everyone that joined today a follow-up email tomorrow with links, contact information, all the good stuff that they talked about if you want to follow up or you want to see something again. But again, thank you guys so much for joining us, and I hope you got a lot out of today's seminar.
Thank you.
Have a good one,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a great
Thank
day.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Great job.